Just go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about your journey with dogs and how you ended up with pugs.
Okay. I'm Carla Rose of Rose Pugs, and I started, oh gosh, 30 years ago on our pugs. Originally, my dogs have been my whole life. I started out as a dog groomer when I was in my teens and got into schnauzers. The gal that taught me to groom had standard and miniature schnauzers. So I started with those and always loved dog shows. When I was a kid, I'd hang around the ring. I was that kid that was asking a million questions. And I started there. And then I bought my own groom shop and still maintain my schnauzer and moved up here to, well, before we moved up to Oregon, I had my oldest son had a bone infection at 17 months old and found out through that he had a blocked ureter, which required major surgery. And at the time, I had my old schnauzer and a toy fox terrier that did not like kids. And so I was looking for a breed of dog that would be great with kids. And pugs fit that. The illustrated description of pugs is they have a special affinity for children. And it's true. I mean, my pugs, there can be one child and 8 adults, and they will go to the child every time. Winnie the Pooh, came to live with us and followed his little trike and all the way up to his wheels, his regular bike, and lived a nice long life till she was 13. And in the meantime, I had got her from a good breeder, bred her, and out of that litter got my first champion. And I was hooked, reeled in. So I just worked really hard. I learned as much as I could. I picked everybody's brains till they were probably ready to choke me. And made, I had decided that to be successful in this, you either had to be rich or you had to be smart. And as a dog groomer, I wasn't going to be rich. So I was lucky enough that I got involved with people that are very respected in the breed and helped me along. And I've traveled all over the world because of my dogs. They're a blessing. So the actually pugs are one of the oldest breeds in existence. They were before Chinese dynasty. They were thought to be bred down from the Chinese Mastiff. Um, they were bred to live with the royalty and sit on the beautiful little Asian ladies' laps. That was their job. They are just bred to love people. They weren't ever watchdogs. They're not hunting dogs. They're just, loved pets. So that was their start. They were originally there was a pair of them given, from what I understand, to some people I think it was in Europe, and from there, from I believe it was a Dutch breeder had them, and then they imported them into the U.S. And that's where they came from. But they actually are very ancient.
About how old do you think they are?
Oh, before Chinese dynasty. I mean, they don't really even have a date, from what I understand. Of course, they looked a lot different, but even going back to Napoleon's wife had one that the history books talk about. And on his wedding night, the dog bit him when he tried to get into bed, is what we understand. So probably the first and last biter.
Right, right. So, can you talk about the official standards of the pugs
Sure.
and how that has changed throughout the years from your experience?
Sure. Our original standard had no DQs, no disqualifications. The standard says that they are to be a square little dog with a curly tail. 30% of the judging is done on their heads. They should be, sound, obviously sounded breathing. They should not have an underbite like a bulldog. A slight reverse scissor bite is what the standard calls for. Weight wise is 14 to 18 pounds, but again, there's no DQ on that. Our standard was, I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago, actually put in the first disqualification. And there was some indiscriminate breeding breeding for color. Unfortunately, a lot of breeds are experiencing this. And people were crossing them with other breeds to produce rare colors. And those rare colors are brindle and white, blue or merle. Let's see what else, blue merle, silver as is in the standard, but it's not the color that we're seeing. And so because of that, someone was showing a brindle pug. And so the Canadian Pug Club and the US Pug Club both put in a DQ into the breed. So they can only be fawn or black. It was the original brindle is from our investigation, showed up in Washington State, believe it or not. I think it was in the 70s or 80s. And it was to a breeder that also bred Boston Terriers. Interesting. So, of course, they will, these breeders tell people, oh, they're purebreds, they're just really rare. But anybody that understands the genetics of a brindle, there is no way that it can just pop up. That one of the parents have to express that color because it's a pattern, it's a dominant pattern. And so it can't just show up in a litter of two brindles, or excuse me, two fawns. It has to have a parent that has that. So there's no way, because the original dogs that came from Europe were fawns and blacks. So can't just show up. You go back to, our club, as a member of the club, we have to agree to breed for the betterment of the breed. And if you're breeding off colors or unregistered dogs or not purebreds, then you are defeating what you have agreed to be. And so, we are a harbor of our breed. We must protect our breed. And so I would never encourage that.
No, I definitely understand. There's different schools of thought, and I
Yeah.
appreciate all schools of thought. So, and pugs to me have always been fawn or black. So, now
Yeah.
where does the black come from? Because there has been some rumors about that as well. That maybe
I
that.
don't think, yeah, I don't think there's a set. I've heard too many exceptions to what supposedly they came in on. That the dogs always did exist, they just weren't preferred. In the Victorian era, I think is when the blacks first started showing up. Without speaking on that and knowing for sure, I can't say. But they are purebred and they did exist further back. They just weren't preferred at the time.
Right. So could you talk about um, what kind of standards do you want to live by with your program as far as height and weight and structure? What makes a good solid show dog pug for you?
Um, I want a moderate dog. I don't, some of our adult males, champions, they can even get up to 24 pounds. And I just think that's too big. Our standard says, substance, a lot and a little, meaning they should have a lot of substance, a lot of bone, a lot of body, no tuck up, level top line. But they're also our standard, even though our dogs tend to be a little heavier than what the standard says, which is up to the top is 18 pounds, because our dogs are so much more substantial now. I prefer a moderate dog. I like a male right around 18, 19 pounds max. Um, there's not really a height. For me, I want a nice square dog. I don't care for long bodies. Everybody has different bones of contention, I guess. For me, a good top line. I have to have a good top line. My basis, I used to breed horses. I forgot to mention that. I used to show paint horses. So movement is an issue for me. And I think movement is movement is movement. It doesn't matter what species it is, unless you're talking a duck. There's correct movement. I want to see correct movement. I want a pretty face. I'm working on now. I imported a dog in from Norway who has perfect breathing. I'm working on the breathing. I like a certain type of color. I like a nice rich black, and I want my fawns to be clear, meaning they don't have a lot of black hair over their coat. I prefer that. With that, sometimes you lose pigment. You lose the ears aren't going to be quite as black. Sometimes you'll get striped nails instead of black nails. Um, so it's a thin line. I don't want to give that up, but then I don't. This is what I prefer as far as color. Um, Temperament is a big deal, huge deal. There is a breeder in our area that is having shy dogs born, and she's struggling with this. It's really tough. Pugs are not to be shy. That is so unbreed like. They are friendly, they're gregarious, they love everybody. They do not make a good watchdog. they they want everybody's attention. And so if I have a shy puppy in my litter, that puppy finds a nice pet home. I just won't mess with it because you're kicking the can down the road. If you breed that dog, probably going to produce that further down the road. So I just cut my losses and put them in a pet home. So it's funny. I have a line of my pugs that are very tiny. I originally got one little girl. She was 14 pounds, and her daughter ended up being 12.8 pounds. She was tiny, very typey, very showy, very everything, bigger than life. She went on to become winner's bitch at the National, over 101 bitches. Uh, that judge I knew loved on the smaller side, but he called it a spit in the eye type of bitch. And that's what I like. I want them to look at you. I want them to, here I am, there's nobody else. So as far as size, I like my bitches around 15 to 16 pounds. I have a few that hit 17. I had one bitch that was 18 pounds, and I bred her right, and she produced the daughter that I kept, who is now 16 pounds. So I don't like the big bitches. I know a lot of times I end up with C-sections because of that, but I think that's the standard I like to follow. I love it. It's Bowers, I believe is how it's pronounced, and it is testing for the breathing. And because of what's going on in Europe with our breed, all the brachycephalic breeds really, there's some countries that are starting to outlaw because they think it's cruel that our dogs can't breathe, which is ridiculous. I mean, we have dogs in agility and obedience and everything else, dock diving, you name it. But I do think it's something us as breeders need to be aware of. And so we are working on that. Unfortunately, every show doesn't offer it. I had two of my dogs tested at the Portland show last year, and one did not test well, and one tested perfect. There was only two pugs the entire weekend that tested perfect, and I have one of them. So it's an ongoing procedure process.
And what does the test entail, and what does that look like?
They What they do is you move them at a trot, and I believe it's for 10 solid minutes or 15 minutes, one of the two, at a trot. You just keep moving them, and then they go in, and the veterinarians listen to their breathing and check their pulse, and listen in with a stethoscope on what's going on in the trachea, and that's how they grade them.
And what is their thoughts on some of the problems that pugs and other brickless falcon breeds have as far as their breathing? What spurs that on you?
Um, well, because they can have a narrowing of the trachea, an elongated palate, which really is so common in our breed, that it can affect it can affect the breathing. They're not able to move as much air, and the nostrils. They need to have nice wide open nostrils, or at least enough to pull air in. Because they have a short muzzle, they don't have the ability to cool the air before going into the lungs like, say, a Labrador does. And so we need to have good breathing in our breed.
And what is your thoughts about what's going on in Europe? And I know there's some really concentrated efforts on not necessarily stopping breeding of the pug, but of outcrossing other breeds to elongate the muzzle. I know
Yeah,
Germany is big in that. They call them retro mops and something else. And I know Norway with the English bulldog and I don't know what else was it, the pug and the
yeah,
King Charles Cavalier. They outlawed those.
yeah.
So, what is your thoughts on these outcross efforts, and then just the outlawing of these brickless breeds in Europe?
I think it's horrible. I know I have a lot of friends over in Europe. I have sold dogs into Europe, and I've been in Europe, and I think it's criminal what they're doing. It's the animal, it's the right activists is what's causing this. This is what's spurring it on. We have it here too. Luckily, so far, we've been able to, stick with each other and stop some of this legislation that they're trying to pass. There was legislation that they tried to pass in California some years ago that breeders had to be showing their dogs by before 6 months, or they were going to have to pay $500 a year to keep an intact dog. Well, AKC, you couldn't show before 6 months. And so, fortunately, a very large group of AKC members went to the Capitol in California and they fought it and it didn't pass. But we have a group here in Oregon that has been keeping on top of this and trying to fight a lot of this legislation they're trying to sneak through. Mostly, I would say, mostly the liberal states, Oregon, California, and some on Washington, but they're the ones that have been mainly trying to push this through.
Yeah, that's of course that's what I noticed as well.
Yeah.
Now, what are some of your European cohorts saying about the efforts in places like Germany and Holland where they are outcrossing these dogs?
I think we're all in the same boat. I think we think it's terrible. Our dogs, just because they're pugs don't mean that they can't breathe. We have a wonderful gal here in our club that does agility with her dogs, and several of them actually, and they do great. I mean, they just fly around the ring. So, just because they're pugs don't mean that they can't breathe. And we do offer agility performance in our national specialties and some of our regionals too. We encourage that. We encourage performance. Slippery slope. And it's like I had read, someone had posted, they came after the greyhounds, then they came after the thoroughbreds, and now they're coming after, several of our breeds. And pretty soon there's not going to be anybody around to stand up when they come after yours. And if you understand the end result of these animal activists, they don't want us to have any dogs. They want it gone. They want the domestic animal eradicated. They don't, I've argued with people about this so many times. Actually, in Ohio years ago, I went in to get a coffee, and the gal there behind the counter had been totally brainwashed. And she goes, "Well, we don't provide any dairy products because dairy cattle are so mistreated. They're forced to have babies and they have to be milked every day." And I'm like, just looking at her like, seriously? I said, you're ridiculous. They're treated very well. If they don't treat them well, they don't produce. And I mean, yeah, there's examples of not nice things that happen, but there's more than that. There's examples of very good care. And so, but they're brainwashed. They think they're doing so. Another problem I've got is these people that are disgusted by puppy millers and backyard breeders and stuff. I am too. I don't agree with it, but they want the government to step in. And you open that door up, pretty soon they're going to come after us too. So it's a very thin line, and you have to be very careful what you're encouraging. So, Wayne Pascal, who was the president of uh, the Humane Society, and he's a former PETA member, and he basically said, I want all animals eradicated, all domestic animals. I mean, he's very clear. So that's my feeling on it. Well, like I said before, when I was a child, I was I was in fourth, fifth grade, living in Lewiston, and I used to sneak over to the dog show every year. Fascinated by it. I can't even tell you why, except that dogs have always been part of my life. And once I started showing, the schnauzers, they weren't, a lot of work. I had a standard, a couple of standards, and they're wonderful dogs. They're super smart and everything. They're a lot of work. And then after we got Winnie the Pooh, I tried showing her a few times, but my son was very small and I didn't have the time. And so once I got my first champion, it was just hooked and reeled. I just love, I love it. It's for me, it's a form of art. It's like when people say, well, gosh, you must really make money at this. I go, are you kidding? It's the whole reason I work. Um, it's like a mountain climber who's never allowed to get to the top, or a stamp collector that's never allowed to get that most coveted stamp. We never achieve perfection, ever. There's always it's a balancing act. And we're working on heads, and pretty soon we're not getting the bone we wanted, and so then we get back into the breeding the bone, and then we're getting longer bodies, and it's a constant balancing act. And that's what draws me. And it's like I tell people, if it was easy, I would have gotten bored a long time ago. It's hard. It's conformation's very hard, and styles have changed a bit. And I see people, like early on, they breed to the flavor of the month. Whatever dog is winning, like Big, the number one in the country or whatever they're winning, that's what they're breeding towards. And sometimes that number one dog isn't the best dog in the country. Often that's true. Um, they have a lot of money behind them, or they're promoted, or, there's a vast reasons why they're doing a lot of winning. You have to keep your standard right beside you. You have to constantly refer to that. And so for me, I've kind of just moseyed along on my own path, basically, stuck with what I liked. I was breeding moderate to smaller pugs because that's what I preferred, and they would get lost in the ring. And now it seems like the American way is, if a little is good, then a lot is going to be better. And so they go to extremes. American people are notoriously for this. And so we would get these really big, tall pugs, and I would just bide my time. And now I'm doing really well with the dogs that I've stuck with. And it's more of a moderate. The pendulum swung back to the center. And now we're looking at the standard again. So I will say this, in Europe, in England mainly, their big thing is they need a single coat. They absolutely need a single coat. They do not, they call our dogs fluffy because we have a double coat. I, I've argued with them actually. I was at the World Show and I had a judge come up to me and started on me about my dog's double coat, and I just shut her down. It's like hair. Are you judging dogs on hair? Because if you are, what are you creating? You're not making any sense. So we were never allowed to take our dogs to crufts, and we kept getting invitations to go to crufts, except that to get there you have to go into quarantine, blah blah blah. Well, now they've opened it up so you can just titer your rabies and we can go to crufts. So the way they control that we don't do well is that they only hire English judges. And so the English judges are going to put an English type of dog up. So I've had 3 or 4 invitations to go to crafts, and I would love to go just to watch, but I would never take a dog at this point anyway, until it kind of starts around, because I will never own an English style dog. That's just my preference.
And what's the reasoning behind their philosophy on the coats?
I have no idea. It's so silly. They've got a very prominent judge that writes articles and everything. And I actually got into it with him on Facebook, because I had sold a dog to a wonderful guy in Thailand. And he was an American champion. I knew he would be the type that could go all the way. He had over 25 best in show and championships in 25 countries, um, all over the world. I mean, he promoted this dog all over the world. He really did put me on the map. And he called me one day and he said, I'm going to send him to England. I want to get an English championship. I'm going to put him with Gadsby, I think his name was, top handler in England. I said, don't waste your time. Don't bother. And he said, oh no. He goes, Gadsby says he can get a championship. Well, I had came out of Westminster. It was the following end of that year. Came out of Westminster. I had gotten best opposite, and this guy who was bazillion feet tall. I mean, I'm 5 foot, almost 5'11". He like towered over me, and he came up with this really strong English accent. And he said, "Are you Carla?" And I said, "Yeah." And so he proceeded to explain that he was Gadsby, and that he had Link, was the dog's name. And he said he could only get 2 wins on that dog. Now this dog was an amazing dog. He was a top winning dog in Thailand. I can't remember what other countries that he was top in. And he could get 2 wins. And the reason why was because of his coat. He had an undercoat. And so this judge that I was talking about, I confronted him about it. I said, you judged one of my dogs over there, and you put him best opposite to a mediocre bitch. Mediocre. Bad top line. I saw the judging. And he said, well, your dog's coat was wrong. You have a plushy coat. I go, our standard says single or double coat. And he argued with me about it. I don't know what their thing is. I don't know. But the single coats are great on blacks, only because, the undercoat is never going to be jet black. And so you're going to get a nice black coat. But other than that, I will never have a single coated dog. I just won't. They'll be a nice pet, because they look like they lack bone. I like that softer look about the coat. It's just my preference. And it's what wins here. We just don't have single coated pugs here winning here. So I have I can't even answer why, except that that's just their thing. They just can't see past that. So, and some of our original top lines started in England, and a very respected longtime breeder that's no longer here, Marjorie, uh, the Sheffield Pugs, and she imported some top winning dogs from England. But our dogs have evolved past that now. We are more worried about conformation. Their dogs tend to be shorter on leg, and they tend to be longer in body. And so we've shortened them up. We want them on, from the top of their back to their tail. I like them about the same length as I like them from the shoulder down to the ground. I want square. I want it pronounced and square. And she didn't have that. So our dogs have evolved a lot.
What part of the world is breeding some of the best pugs besides the United States, you think?
Well, this is going to sound egotistical, and that's okay, because I think our American dogs are amazing. Um, I would say the countries that are smart enough to import American dogs. And I have, several dogs overseas, and I have seen the the Russian dogs went from I wouldn't have owned one to some lovely dogs. I mean, they're very serious dog people. I mean, there's exceptions, but they're serious dog people, and you know, I vet them out, and I've placed, a few dogs over there, and I'll tell you what, there's dogs over there I would bring home. I mean, they're beautiful. And there's a gal that I imported a dog from Spain from, and actually, her dog won the American National under Charlotte Patterson, who's highly respected in our breed, from the classes. He was the top winning dog in Spain, actually, top winning all breed dog in Spain. But he was just a class dog in the US, and he won the breed there. He was a nice dog, so I have a son of his. Um, so we're seeing quality is coming back in. It's really kind of exciting. I have some in Denmark, and her dogs she's using my lines, and she's infusing other lines, getting some beautiful dogs. So it's exciting. That's why it's so horrible that they're trying to outlaw or at least change the pug over there, because they're finally producing some really beautiful dogs. On a high set tail right off the top of the back. The tail set used to be really low, and I think our breeders are really working hard at that. Um, there's a saying that when you look at a tail set, you want their anus to be tilted skyward, and that it's true. I mean, you want a nice top of the back tail. Um, the curl should be, you can single or double curl. They say the double curl is an amazing, because we don't get it, very much. Um, I've had some that were corkscrewed off the top of the back that looked really silly. So I don't worry too much about the length, but you want a nice tight tail.
Can you talk about some of the modern health issues that the dog has and what you guys have to be aware of while you breed?
Sure. We have something in our breed called pug dog encephalitis. It is an always fatal. It Unfortunately, we have no survivors that I'm aware of. We have a doctor that did research some years ago that our club funded, and they did a research, found the gene that they think is what causes this, but she didn't get it narrowed down. Like she said, she narrowed it down to the neighborhood, but not down to the house, basically. So we have a basic idea of where it comes from. And so through that, we now have a test that we can test our dogs through UC Davis. And there's three results, three judging. And the best one is NN, meaning they supposedly don't carry the gene for that. Now, we've had some dogs with NN that have had PDE, not very common. It's not a very common disease anyway. Then the second best is NS, which means one gene, and then SS means they carry on both genes. Even if they're SS, you only have a 17% chance of them actually expressing PDE. So that would probably be the most serious. We've got spinal issues that are not necessarily breed specific, where they can lose motor skills through their rear as they get older. Um, I would say that's about it, other than the breathing, of course.
Mhm. How about their eyes? Is it
Oh, yeah, the eyes, minor detail. Yeah, entropion and dystechia. Dystechia is where the eyelid turns in, and they have little hairs on have like a double row of hairs, and that'll rub the inside of the eye. Entropion, again, that's rolling in, and same sort of thing. It isn't necessarily, a lot of the doctors will tell you they think it's because of the flat face. I think it's more common just because of the breed. Because I've known plenty of beautiful heads that had no dystechia or entropion. So I just think it's a genetic thing. It's easily to have it fixed. If my dogs do have it, I'm aware of it. And after they finish their championships, I will have it fixed. So they're comfortable for the rest of their life. And usually they're retired and go to a pet home. So, but it is getting better. I think us breeders are really looking at this. Pigmented eyes where they don't blink efficiently. Our first pug had that. She would sleep with her eye partially open. And so she developed pigment that started to go over her pupil. And so, I had no idea. I mean, she was our first pug, she was a pet. And so I found an eye surgeon in California and he repaired that. And so that's something that can and does happen.
What does health testing mean to you and your program?
All my dogs are PDE tested. Like I said, it's not 100%, but I can use it as a guideline. And so the doctor encouraged us as breeders to, if we have an SS dog, not to remove them from our breeding program. Because what's going to happen is we're going to end up with such heavily inbred dogs, we're going to have more problems. So I've been lucky. I haven't had any SS, but I've had NSs and I have NNs. So when I do the breeding, I'm like, okay, so conformationally, does this dog, you know, does it complement the one I want to breed to? And what is the PDE test? I want to know that. I check patellas, make sure they don't have luxating patellas. I check the eyes, and breathing is an issue. And you can hear if they've got a breathing problem. I've been very fortunate to have worked for very good vets. And so they've also taught me quite a bit.
What's your philosophy on, say, like OFA and some more
Um,
advanced health testing?
yeah, I've done OFA, but I'm not going to put them under for anything. In other words, if I'm putting them under for a dental or some other reason, then I'll have their hips x-rayed. I think, and of course it's going to be probably disputed, but pugs have a natural rolling movement. And so I think that kind of lends itself to having a looser hip joint. But it is something that I do.
Now, is it true that you can't breed a black to a fawn?
Nope, I do it all the time. In fact, my original black that I got, black bitch from Deanne Little and Doolittle Pugs, I bred her to a black. I ended up with, I actually got 9 puppies out of that litter. It was crazy. And there was 1 fawn in it. So she was a recessive black, and the sire was as well. And so I kept a male out of that litter, and he was, he had the fawn gene, and so he produced both. I have improved my blacks by doing that, because it used to be blacks were so mediocre compared to the fawn. And I've had so many judges tell me, "Oh my God, this is the best black I've seen." What are you doing? I mean, the dogs we have, I've been judging. It's like I just would never ever use them, like, in my ring. And that's how I did it, is by breeding very good fawns. Actually, year before last, one of my black bitches was winner's bitch at the national, and her sire has produced some beautiful dogs, fawn and black. So a lot of times, I have a 3-step sort of breeding program where I will cross a fawn and a black. And then if I keep a black out of that, and if the male that I'm picking is a black, and if he's going to complement her conformation, then I'll breed back into black. And then it improves the pigment, because you are going to lose some pigment. One thing I've had an argument with people, but no matter what breed of dog, German Shepherd, any breed of dog, a black dog will never have a jet black undercoat, ever. I mean, if you think back on German Shepherds, even Rottweilers, any breed of dog that's jet black is not going to have a jet black undercoat. And so, expecting the standard calls for black, and it doesn't allow any rusting or anything. Really, it's discouraged. But if your dog has an undercoat and it's showing, then you're going to end up with some lighter color in there. So it's a pretty thin line. It's another thin line, but I work on my blacks by going back into fawn.
What was the reasoning? Because I did notice the differences
Mm-hmm.
in between the fawns and the blacks as
Yep.
far as like it seemed like the blacks were a little more were slighter,
Yeah.
weren't as
Because
compact
yep.
and bone didn't have as much bone. What was the reasoning for that? You think?
Because the rule of thumb in the 60s and 70s was you never cross the two, ever. And there was some people in the breed that wanted to split out the blacks and the fawns. And this has been, I haven't heard it recently, but up until even maybe 5 or 6 years ago, they were trying to get our club to split the breed so we would have black fawn or black classes and then fawn classes and a fawn champion and a black champion. Well, I think that's a huge mistake. And I always voted no, because even though we have going in with a black, very often you have two strikes against you. And because there's the old judges are used to looking at mediocre blacks. But the only way we're going to ever end up with a black that's going to be as good as the fawns is by staying in there competing against them. And that's what we're doing. And we are now, we have some beautiful blacks in our country. And I'm just so proud of what I've produced because I've, national specialty winners and specialty winners, just it's been amazing. So when you win with the black, it's just that much better, especially as an owner handler, which I am. I have a reserve best in show black that was handled by a friend of mine that is a handler. And, that I'm as proud of that as I am my best in show dog because it's just an amazing feat to be able to do that. So I'm excited about where our breed is going actually.
Talk about being an odor handler. How is that? I know that that world can be kind of competitive. And
Oh, yeah.
do you guys sometimes get the short end of the stick because you're not in that crowd?
Yeah, very often. We go in there and we're at a disadvantage. Um, the handlers will tell you that the biggest thing that they worry about is an owner handler that really gets their dog and handles well because they have a relationship with that dog, which is true. But, most owner, well, not most, I shouldn't say, a lot of owner handlers do not handle that well. It's an art, it's a form of art. And these guys do this for a living. So the way I learned to handle was whenever, and I was a point donator. I mean, my dogs always lost, but I'd drag them to the shows and then I would lose. And then come group time, I would go to the groups and I would sit and watch all the groups. And I would watch how these people, that's how you learn, what are they doing that's winning? How are they winning? How are they presenting their dogs? And so that's how I learned to handle. And I'm not the best um, by any means, but I am proud of what I show, and I do my fair share of winning. So I love the idea of taking my dogs in. I don't like to see professional handlers in the classes. If you can't handle your dog, fine. If you just physically can't do it, but you know, hiring a handler to handle your dogs in the classes, I think I think it defeats. In the breed, it's a different thing because I've had my dogs out with handlers being special, and I can't hit all the shows every weekend. I can't do it, and so they can. But as far as being in the classes, I just think it's wrong. I think what's going to happen is it's going to become like the way the poodles are. Poodles, if you're not a handler, good luck. you know, you're not, you're probably not going to be looked at unless you're well known. And I think that's something that pugs can end up being at if we're not careful.
Do you ever show in the UKC?
No, I never have. I wanted to. Um, it's a much easier way to do it. I've known people that have done it. I live where there's no shows around me except for one. And so for me to travel for a UKC show, I did, okay, I should say, I did show in Russia once, and I did show at the World Show. So I did do that. But as far as doing it in the US, no, I have not.
The show world is really interesting. I mean, it seems like, I mean, being a dog enthusiast, it interests me, but there are some things about it that seem like a little too exclusive
Yeah.
in some ways. How? What are some of the things that you would do to say entice newer people and younger people to get involved in the show ring? Because I know that's a conversation that a lot of
Yeah.
professionals have, and people in the top echelon in the AKC world, they lament about this. You know that it's an aging sport, and there isn't as much people taking people's places,
Yeah.
and they allude to the fact that it might be some of the cultural aspects. What are some of the things that you think would be a good thing?
I have mentored several people. Um, one of which I mentored probably 20 years ago. She's still in it and very active in it. So I believe in mentoring. I have placed really nice dogs with juniors before, so they can get their feet wet and get in the junior ring and then hopefully go on to the breed ring. Whenever we have a newbie that comes ringside, and I will say for most breeds, I think the pug people are overall some of the nicest. We are usually very inviting. Um, we encourage the new people and try to help out. I've actually propped this one newbie up at the Portland show, propped her dog up on a like a table that someone let me do, and taught her how to groom that dog. And now she's doing her own dogs and she's out there and she's winning. I have actually chastised people ringside. The same lady was at a show. She had just bought her first show dog. She was showing in the puppy match, and this gal with a Shih Tzu told her that her dog was never going to be a show dog. And I stopped the lady and I said, why are you having this conversation with her? Why are you telling her this? And well, because she's going to drag that dog around. I said, you know what? We've all dragged dogs around, because if we got a top winning dog right out of the gate, we're going to be bored with this. I said, everybody's got to pay their dues. They got to spend some time learning. And I said, by discouraging this gal, I said, you're really hurting the sport. So I think we all need to be really encouraging. So, and like I said, I'm lucky because our breed, overall, the people in our breed are very kind.
I may be a little you'll probably differ with me on this, but I'm kind of a person who doesn't like elitism or elites, period. So I'm biased from the get
Yeah,
go. I kind of look at the show world and I kind of get my oppositional defiance kind of kicked in when I see people buttoned up and stuff. I just wonder if maybe there would be some sort of like a little more fun, a little little less buttoned up with that. But I know a lot of people that are in the show world like that, and that's
yeah,
what feeds fuels their fire. But for somebody like me who would like to be involved but may not like that side of it, and kind of the stiffness of it, and in the lack of like, I don't mind competition. I love competition. I love
yeah,
emotions, and all. I mean, I grew up playing sports, and I did that the whole 9 yards on that. So I get the competitive side, I just kind of the stuffiness and all these rules and uh, that kind of take away from what we're there for is the dogs and the
Yeah.
conformation and showing off your stock. Is there anything that you think that could be a little less stuffy about it?
Well, that's tough. Well, AKC does offer owner handler classes. And so we're able to enter as an owner handler. And so we're not competing against the professionals. So in that way, they've offered that. But in the long run, you're going to still end up in the winner's ring. And that's where the points are applied basically. So yeah, you could win the owner handler, competition, but when it comes down to getting points on your dog, you're competing against the rest. Um, I don't know what else they could really do besides what we have. They do the competition with the owner's handler, and you get the best owner handler. So they'll pick the breed dog and best opposite and that, doing the breed. And then that one of those people in there who is an owner handler gets picked to be owner handler. And they can go on and present their dog in an owner handler group. And then from there, if they win that group, they go on to best in show. So there is things that you can do as an owner handler. It's I can't think of anything that they can make it any more inviting. Maybe have more fun matches at the shows. Um, we have a few shows that have fun matches, but overall, most of our shows they don't. The next show I go to has a 4 to 6 puppy class. It's called beginner puppy class, and I have my puppy entered in that just to get his feet wet and get him out there. But even there, that's not offered all that often. So it I just think that, the main thing is we need to be encouraging of the new people and don't sell them a crummy dog. I've seen that so many times. A newbie come in and they want to, show and then the breeder takes advantage and sells a mediocre dog. You know, I mean, I don't expect them to end up with a best in show dog, but give them a chance. Chance to experience it.
I had this conversation a lot with breeders, not necessarily just in the show world either, but just breeders in general. Um, I always, and it's easy for me because I'm not a breeder and I'm not a shower or whatever. But I think if I had um, some really quality dogs, and I would want somebody that was had the fire in their eyes to have
Yep.
a top quality dog, maybe even my best dog out of the litter, because to me it's good promotion, it's good business to begin with. It shows off your program, so it's
Yep.
you're not being completely selfless by doing that. But then, then it also shows it gives people a good taste in their mouth, and it's better for the breed. And what I see with a lot of breeders, for multitude of reasons, always keep their best stock, and it's either they keep it themselves or they give it to their best friend who is also in the same business or whatever. And uh, it's always their lackluster that gets out to the public, and to me is how is that good business? It
Right.
just and I do look at breeding as you have to look at it as a business, because you've got to move puppies that aren't going to be a part of your program, and you want
Right.
them to go to good homes. And
Yeah.
you and business isn't just about the monetary side of it, it's also about how you treat your customers
Sure.
and how and all of that. Um so what is as a breeder, is it hard to think about, like, so I know sometimes you might give a really good dog to somebody and they just flat out kind of stab you in the back or whatever. What's your philosophy on that, as far as like helping somebody out with a dog? Or Are you more inclined, or is it just really tough altogether because you got burnt too many times?
I have been pretty, I don't want to say lucky, but I've been very selective on who I get involved with. Um, like the dog I told you that had all the championships throughout the world, I knew what I had in him. I kept his brother and him, finished both their championships, and everybody's like, "You're selling the wrong one. You're Carlton was cobbier and everything, but he didn't have the head. Um, where Link had, he just had everything." But I knew that Pop had the money to promote that dog. I did not. And so I sent him actually the best puppy out of the litter. Really, I did. Carlton went on and got a best in show, and he was no slouch. He was a nice little dog, but he was not going to appeal to overall judges. He just wasn't. And so our goal as a breeder is to breed for ourselves. And so, I am not going, like, I don't believe in letting bitches cycle and cycle and cycle. I think you end up with pyometria and other problems. So I like to have them bred by two. But in the end, I'm looking for my next show prospect. And so I was lucky enough that the black bitch that I won at the national with, I bred her to our stud dog. I ended up with 5 males, beautiful males. And I put one in a pet home because the pet home was amazing. And the other one, there was a gal that contacted me early on, and I knew that she was a very talented handler. She was a great home. I gave her choice out of 2 of the puppies. And I think she probably ended up with one of the best ones. She just finished him undefeated as an 8-month-old puppy with 3 5-point majors at a specialty. So she's thrilled. I'm thrilled, because she's out there winning with them. I kept the brother. We'll see how he does. He's a little different type. And so, I am really particular who goes in a show home. 9 times out of 10, if it's questionable, it's going to go to a pet home because it's representing my kennel. And that is always in the back of my mind. That's why I won't breed. I've had so many pet people contact me. We want to breed Lulu, and we want her to have a litter of puppies because all my family wants one. And when I was really hurting for money, I thought, oh, that $1,000 stud fee sure sounds good. And then I thought, and what if Lulu's puppies show up ringside? So I would turn them down. And I think my reputation means the most to me. I want those dogs to present, the best. So I'm really picking, who goes into a show home. And I like them to also not be in my area. So, I like them winning in Florida. But, why? Because I'm going to probably keep my pick out of the litter. And I don't want them to feel like they have to compete against that puppy. So I usually won't. I do have a couple that I've been mentoring for years. We're now co-breeders on so many of our dogs. And they started off, he got his first show dog from a friend of mine. And the dog hated showing, hated. And he was a black male. So it's like, how about 2 strikes against you? And he dragged that dog around till finally one day we just grabbed him and said, please just retire him. Just let us get you a good one that loves it. And so that's how I was introduced to him. And they have been amazing, just amazing. They're best friends. Um, they don't do any breeding or any selling of dogs without my okay. I co-own everything. And they have just been a joy to work with, absolute joy. So, but like I said, I'm real particular. Okay. I don't do inbreeding per se. I do some line breeding. I feel like we can line breed 2 generations. By the third one, we need to look to an outcross. But that's loosely, the main thing for me is what's behind my dogs. I'm now on probably the 10th generation. So I have a pretty good idea of what's behind my dogs um, genetically. And so, unless I'm bringing in new genetics, which I have, um, I know pretty much kind of what I'm going to get. Although I have done some outcrosses where I just knew, this was going to be God's litter. This was going to be the most perfect litter in the world. And she had 3 puppies, and one male I finished his championship and I petted him out because I hated his front. And the bitch I could never get finished. She had 7 points. And then the other one was a pet. I mean, sometimes you think you know what you're going to get, and you're surprised because that's nature. So, but I I do believe in line breeding. I think when you're doing lots of outcrossing, you're never going to get consistency. You're going to get, like I've read a lot of books on it, and some of the experts will tell you that if you have, say, a bitch that is long, and so you breed her to a really short bitch or dog, not bitch, dog, and what you're going to get, you're not going to get correct. You're probably going to get some short and some long. And so, you have to know what's behind them as well. Like I have a little dog right now, he could not be shorter in body, but his sister is long. So we, did a test breeding with them. So far, the puppies all look like they're pretty short, um, but we'll see. They're 12 weeks old, so I have a pretty good idea. I think they're going to be okay, but I can't guarantee that he's going to produce short.
What would do you look at the coefficient when it comes to making up your mind to maybe go for an outcross? Or?
I do. That's in the back of my mind. I do that, but more than anything, it's the health and it's the type. I am more of a type breeder. Some people really go on the pedigree and this matches that, and that's great. If it works for them, super. But for me, it's a lot of it's type. You know, there I need this certain type, and so I have a cookie cutter idea of what I want, and do I think this is going to fit? And my dogs are kind of getting more cutter, where they're consistently producing what I want, but it's been a long haul. I think that's one thing. You can read all the books in the world and study all the pedigrees in the world, and the end of the day, you got to put your time in. This is a long, hard road. So it's not an easy sport. Oh gosh, I'm glad you asked that because this will scare everybody. Um, our our pugs are wonderful dogs. They're sweet. They love their people. They don't necessarily. They're not the best moms. They're not going to really hurt them, but they want to be with us. And so I have some moms that are happy to stay with their babies, but I would say most of them will follow me right out of the room. They want to be with us. And so, with saying that, they're also very heavy bodied little dogs, and they will lay on their babies. They don't mean to. It's like you got 6, oh, we only got 5 left. No, they don't mean to lay on them, but they do. So, when I whelp my litter, most of the time I do a section now. I've had some real tragedies over the years, and I'm a little punchy about it. And because I work for these doctors, I'm right in surgery, barking orders at the tech. So most of the time, I will do a section. I bring him home. I've got 2 incubators. I've got concentrated oxygen machine. I've got, fading puppy formula. I've got frozen colostrum in my freezer that I've milked out of bitches from before that had a lot. I also have bitch milk. I've got everything ready, and even with that, you know, it can be a heartache, really a heartache. You struggle to save them. You have a fading puppy, and you do everything you can, and that puppy dies on you. It's really tough. My top winning, probably the best pug I've ever bred, is a bitch, of course. Wanted a male, but that's fine. But Demi has won two national specialties, well, regional specialties during National Week. She's done amazing. She's great. Tried to breed her, she didn't take. And then next heat I tried to breed her again, she didn't take. So I did a surgical insemination. I bred her with my black dog because conformationally I didn't really want black, but I wanted that type. She produced 3 black and 1 fawn, and I wanted a fawn male. I got a fawn girl, which is fine. I was okay with it. So I got 2 boys and then 2 girls. My fawn girl developed aspiration pneumonia day 3, and I lost her. So, it's hard. It's really hard. It's kind of a heartache breed. Every one of them, when they're nursing, when the milk lets down, the milk will come out the nose. So you're sitting there with a little suction thing, and you're sucking that baby's nose out every time they nurse. And every 2 hours, you're getting up during the night to put them on their mom. And usually that's the first at least 10 days, usually 2 weeks. So it's not easy. It's very hard. Now we have backyard bred pugs that have whelped out 8 puppies and they're just fine. They're in a cardboard box. That's not a reality. They're lucky. So it's not an easy thing. Like right now, I just came off of having 3 litters the last probably 4 months. And I'm kind of done for the year. I'm probably not going to be, but I'm just over it. I'm ready for a break because it's a lot. I don't go on vacation. My husband, God bless him, he's going to go on a cruise with his friend because, it's awful. I don't get to go do anything. So, but that's what I chose and I love it. So, it was the first time I've done surgical. And I had 3 bitches because of COVID. We got set behind. I like to breed them after they're finished. And because of COVID, there was no dog shows. So for at least a year, we were stuck at home. And so I was, my girls weren't getting finished. And so it set me behind. And then when I bred these 3 girls, one of which was Demi, they didn't take. And so 2 of them were 4 years old, one was 3 years old, and I usually like them bred by 2. I don't think pugs have a long reproductive life. They will quit cycling pretty early, I find. So anyway, long story short, I talked to my doctors. I said, let's do surgicals. I don't want to screw around with this. So the first one, we did a surgical. She had 7. She had 7 with 6 working nipples, and she had 1 tiny little black girl that I bottle fed for a month. Then the next litter, which was 3 weeks later, she had 6, and they all were fine. And luckily, the co-breeder took that litter after 2 weeks because then Demi had the last litter and she had 4. And so, needless to say, I'm a little tired. But yeah, it worked really well, obviously, but usually I do AIs and with good success.
What are some of the downsides of surgical? Like I'm convinced with surgical, but I always like to know some of the downsides.
Sure.
Obviously if they go under and all that, that's
Yeah, putting them under, that's always a concern. Anytime you put a brachycephalic breed under, you're taking a chance. So putting them under is a concern. Um, Introducing possible bacterial infection, you're opening up their abdomen, and surgical, they've got to heal from that. So, but other than that, I had obviously great luck. So it's something that I will do again. If I end up with a bitch that doesn't take on the first time and I need her to take, I will do a surgical. I'll also do a surgical when I decide to use some of my frozen. So they some vets will do a transcervical breeding with frozen, but I'm hearing that the surgical is more successful. So
So what do you see the future of program? What are you hoping in say 5 years? What's next?
well, I had seriously started working towards becoming a judge, and the more I pursued it, the more I realized that if you, as a judge, it's very hard to be a breeder. I decided to stick with the breeding. I figured that was where my value was. And so, I'm 68. I'm not sure how long I'm going to do this. I love it. It's my life. And gosh, I would like to get, more winners on the ground. I've got a couple of puppies that I'm really excited about. So it's that constant donkey and carrot. It's always the next puppy, oh, this is going to be a great one. So that's what keeps me going. It just keeps me in it. It's worth all the heartache and the sad stories and, losing puppies, everything. It's that next winner and healthy winner. So I guess that's it. We have our national specialty is going to be in Spokane this year. Our club is going to host it. So I'm really excited about that. Um, it's 2.5 hours for me. So most of the time I'm flying across the country with one dog because we have a moving national. So last year it was in Virginia Beach. The year before it was in Wyoming. So it depends on which zone is hosting it. And so this year we are going to be in Spokane. So I'm excited. A whole week of nothing but pug talk. I think that I think the horizon looks great. I think people are doing really well. They're considering the health more now. Um, Type seems to be much better. Depends on what region you're in. There's better dogs in certain regions. I'm lucky enough to live in a region that has some of the best pugs. I mean, I absolutely am convinced. And the reason why I say that I'm lucky is because I'm not going to get lazy. I'm not going to get lackadaisical and go, oh, well, my dogs are great. Because at any given weekend, I could walk away a loser, because we've got nice dogs out here. So I think we're in a good place. I really do. As long as the breeders hang in there and stick to their guns, it's a concern with the hate being directed at the brachycephalic breeds. We've got to stick to our guns and keep our rights as breeders and do well for our dogs as well. We are the keepers of our breed. And I think it's important to usher in new blood too. We need new people in there. So us old ones, we're not going to be around forever.
Yeah. Are your kennel partners going to take over the program when you officially retire, or?
That was the plan. I've been giving them a hard time because they hate to do the breeding end of it. It just stresses them out. They just, and I tell them, you got to take on my kennel. You got to, take it from me. And they're like, oh God, one litter a year might be enough for them because they stress out. I mean, they're wonderful. They do a great job with them, but that just stresses them out. So I hope so. I have other people that are working with my lines in other countries. There's a little gal named Vic in Russia that has 3 of my dogs now. And she's amazing, just amazing. So it's terrible what the world's done to the Russian breeders because the judges and the competitors couldn't leave their country. The other countries wouldn't allow them in because of the war, which is just stupid. You know, they're not the ones. They're not the ones out there dragging a rifle around shooting at people. It's just to me, it's just crazy. But she's been able to go to a lot of shows and just doing so well. So I know my lines will continue on past me. That every breeder hopes for that.
What was it like when you first got in, and how is that compared to now, and the good and the bad over those two things?
So much. so much. Some of the dogs that I finished, say 15 years ago, would never finish now. I really feel our breed has improved so much that, you look at the top winners, say back in the 70s, and everything about them was from the ear forward. It was almost like the heads were the only thing that mattered. And the bodies were long. They didn't have a ton of bone. They had low tail sets, not great top lines, but by golly, they had a beautiful head. Well, they don't walk on their head. And our standard says a lot in a little. And I think as breeders, I think we've brought the breed along so well. Like I said before, I never take it for granted that my dogs are going to win, because there's any matter of dogs in that ring that can win, that justifiably wins. So we need new judges getting in and knowing our breed. I've mentored some judges because I think that's really important, um, for the judges to understand. Because the old time judges, they're, like I said, a lot of them won't even look at a black. I mean, they disregard. In fact, one of our well, the young puppy that won, he was the owner was told that he never looks at black, and this was only the second black he's ever seen that he'd put up. So I think our dogs have come a long way. I think the horizon looks really good for the breed.
If you had all the money in the world, all the time, all the help, what would be the second breed?
Oh wow. Um, believe it or not, I since I've had this little rescue Chihuahua, I might have gotten a show Chihuahua. I'm telling you, I can't believe I'm even saying that out loud, but I just think they're darling. They're charming and they're funny, and they're terrier like. And of course, I started in terriers. I love my standard schnauzers, loved them. They're the dog with the human brain, and that's good and bad. When you're outsmarted by your own dog, sometimes that's not so good. I love that breed. I thought the Pumi, I mean, here I go. You wanted one, right? I think the Pumis are darling. Absolutely. I saw pictures of them before AKC recognized them, and I was just gaga over them. And now they're AKC registered. People are really getting into the breed. I just think they're darling. So, and I've had a Rottweiler. I used to do Schutzen, believe it or not. And I had a Rottweiler and a Shepherd. I If I was younger, I would have another Rottie, but I just am. I don't think I have the energy to deal with the first 2 years. She was so destructive and so determined to do what she was going to do, and I don't have that in me anymore. So